Did a man ever sue God in a US court? It's a story many people have heard. Maybe someone told it to you at a party, or you saw it in a movie. The idea is catchy. It makes you think. Someone, fed up with bad luck or natural disasters, decides to take the ultimate complaint to court. They want to hold God accountable. It sounds like something from a wild comedy or a deep philosophical book. But the US legal system is a real place. It has rules, it has limits. So the simple answer is no. Not in the way most people imagine it, not for real damages decided by a jury against an actual divine being. But the story isn't completely made up. There are bits of truth woven into it. People have tried things that look a lot like suing God. They often do it to make a point, or to challenge how the law works, or because they are genuinely distraught. And these attempts, even if they never go anywhere, show us interesting things about people. They show us how we deal with things we cannot control. They show us how we try to find justice in a complex world. Our legal system is built for human interactions. It handles disputes between people, or between people and companies, or between people and the government. It's not really set up to handle disputes with the heavens. Think about what a lawsuit needs. First, you need a plaintiff. That's the person who brings the suit. They have to show they were harmed. They have to have a reason to sue. Then, you need a defendant. That's who the plaintiff is suing. The defendant has to be a legal entity. This means they can be sued. They can own property. They can enter contracts. A person is a legal entity. A company is a legal entity. The government is a legal entity. But God? That gets tricky. How do you serve papers on God? How do you even define God in a legal sense? Is it the God of one religion? All religions? And what kind of harm can you pin on a divine being in a way the law understands? A hurricane might be called an act of God by an insurance company, but that's just a phrase. It means an event outside human control. It doesn't mean God literally picked up a storm and aimed it at your house. The courts also need jurisdiction. This means they have the authority to hear a case. They need power over the defendant and over the subject of the case. A court in Nebraska has power over people and property in Nebraska. Does it have power over a deity? It's not a question our legal system was designed to answer. And then there's the remedy. If you win a lawsuit, the court orders the defendant to do something and pay money. Stop doing something. Start doing something. What could a court order God to do? Give you back your old car after a flood? Stop a drought? The whole thing quickly moves from legal questions to theological or philosophical ones. And courts are not set up to be theologians. They are there to apply laws made by people. So, the story of suing God is more of a cultural idea. It's a way to express frustration, or to explore the limits of human law. It shows us that people want answers. They want someone to be responsible. When bad things happen, it's natural to look for blame. And if there's no human blame, sometimes the blame goes higher. This idea pops up in literature and jokes. It's a way to make fun of the system, or to question fate. But in a real courtroom with robes and judges and lawyers, things are much more grounded. They deal with evidence, they deal with facts, they deal with legal definitions, and God, in a legal sense, doesn't fit into those definitions. The US court system takes itself seriously. It can't just invent a legal person to sue, it has to follow its own rules, and those rules do not include a defendant from the divine realm. This does not mean people have not tried. They certainly have, and these attempts are interesting. They offer a glimpse into the human mind when it grapples with big ideas and big problems. These cases are often dismissed quickly, but they leave a mark. They become part of the legal folklore. They become the man who sued God stories, and they help us understand the boundaries of what our legal system can and cannot do. It's a system built by humans. For humans, it's powerful, but it's not all powerful. It has to stay within its own framework, and that framework doesn't have a place for the divine as a defendant. It's a powerful image, though. Imagine a lawyer standing before a judge. They are arguing against the Almighty. It sounds dramatic, it sounds important, but the drama usually ends fast. A judge looks at the filing, they shake their head, and the case is gone because the person bringing the suit cannot name a proper defendant. They cannot explain how the court has power over that defendant. They cannot say what kind of relief the court could even give. It's a thought experiment, not a real lawsuit, but it's a thought experiment that people keep bringing up because it speaks to something deep inside us. It speaks to our search for justice. Even when justice seems far beyond our reach, the closest a real US court case ever got to a man suing God happened in Nebraska. This wasn't a joke. It was a serious, thought-out move by a state senator named Ernest Chambers. And Senator Chambers is a unique person. He has a long history of pushing boundaries. He uses legal tools to make social and political points. He's not afraid to be unconventional. So, in 2007, he filed a lawsuit. He named God as the defendant. But he wasn't really trying to get money from God. He had a different goal in mind. Chambers sued God to make a statement. He wanted to highlight a problem he saw. He believed that the legal system gave too much special treatment to religion. He felt it let religious groups avoid certain responsibilities, or get away with things that secular groups could not. Specifically, he was challenging how courts handle cases where religious language is used to excuse harm. He wanted to show that the legal system sometimes bends over backward for religious freedom, even when it might cause problems. He also wanted to point out how the courts treat defendants. His lawsuit was filed in an Omaha court. It was a proper legal document. It listed God, Lord, and divine entity as defendants. He claimed God was responsible for terroristic threats. These threats included things like floods, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. He argued that God had caused fearsome floods, deer tornadoes, and perfidious plagues. He listed a lot of bad things that happened in the world, and he blamed God for them. He asked the court to order God to stop these harmful acts. He also wanted a permanent injunction against God. This would mean God couldn't do these things anymore. Now, this sounds like a straight-up suit against God. But Chambers had a clever legal twist. He was actually trying to challenge a specific legal principle. In lawsuits, you have to serve the defendant. This means you have to officially give them the papers. Chambers knew he couldn't serve God, so he argued that because God is everywhere, God was already served. He said, given the omnipresence of the defendant and defendant's alleged knowledge of all things, there is no need to personally serve the defendant. This was his way of getting around a major roadblock. He was using religious concepts against the legal system. He was saying, if you believe God is everywhere, then God knows about this lawsuit. So, it served. The real target of Chambers' suit wasn't God. It was the legal system itself. He wanted to show how ridiculous it could get when courts started making exceptions for religious beliefs. How he wanted to force the court to confront the idea of a non-human defendant, and he wanted to challenge the definition of a person in legal terms. If the court would just dismiss his case because God is an illegal person, he could then argue that the court was inconsistent. He might say, if you can't sue God, why do religious institutions get special legal treatment? It was a carefully crafted piece of legal theater. The court's reaction was predictable. The judge, Marlon Polk, dismissed the lawsuit. He didn't just dismiss it because it was silly. He gave very specific legal reasons. He noted that Chambers couldn't meet the requirements for a lawsuit. The judge said the court lacked personal jurisdiction over God. This means the court had no legal power over the defendant. He also said Chambers couldn't properly serve God. The judge pointed out that no one could list a physical address for God, or a process for how God could respond to the suit. The judge also highlighted the problem of finding a legal remedy. What could a court order God to do, and how would that order be enforced? The judge's dismissal stated that Chambers could not demonstrate that the defendant, God, had been given notice of the proceedings. He also said that due to the nature of defendant, no address can be listed for service of process. This was a straightforward legal ruling. It avoided getting into theological debates. It simply stuck to the rules of procedure. The court said, look, you haven't followed the basic steps required to bring a case. You can't sue someone if you can't even tell them they're being sued, and you can't sue someone who isn't a legal person in the first place. But Chambers achieved his goal. He got attention. He made people talk about the issues he cared about. He used a seemingly outlandish lawsuit to spark a real debate about the separation of church and state. He showed how legal language and religious language can clash. His case became famous. It's often the one people think of when they hear about suing God, but it's important to remember why he did it. It wasn't about winning money from God. It was about using the system to highlight its own quirks and inconsistencies, especially regarding religion. It was a clever legal maneuver, not a serious attempt to punish a divine being, and it remains the most well-known example of someone trying to bring God into a U.S. courtroom. Ernest Chambers' case is the most famous, but he wasn't the only one to try something like it. Other people, for various reasons, have also attempted to bring lawsuits against God or similar divine entities in U.S. courts. These cases rarely get much attention. They almost always meet the same fate, quick dismissal. But each attempt shows a different angle of why someone might try such a thing, and why the courts consistently say no. Sometimes, people sue God out of extreme grief or anger. They might have lost loved ones in a natural disaster. or they face tremendous hardship, they feel helpless, they feel wronged, and they cannot find a human target for their pain. So, in their distress, they turn to what they see as the ultimate cause. They might believe God is responsible for their suffering. Or they see God as the only one powerful enough to have prevented it. They are looking for justice, even if that justice seems impossible to get from a legal system. One such case happened in 1970. A man named Russell Stover from Arizona tried to sue God. He blamed God for the death of his business. Stover was in the candy business. His company was Russell Stover Candies, but this wasn't that Russell Stover. This was a different person. He claimed God had caused a drought that ruined his crops, and therefore his candy business failed. He asked for damages. He filed his lawsuit in federal court. The court quickly dismissed it. The reasons were similar to the Chambers case. The court could not establish jurisdiction over God. It could not serve God, and it recognized that God is not a legal person who can be sued. This case shows the desperation people feel when their livelihoods are destroyed by things outside their control. They want someone to answer for it. Another type of case involves people trying to sue religious institutions, but they try to frame it as suing God. This is a subtle but important difference. For example, someone might sue a church for negligence or for fraud. They might then try to argue that the church, as a representative of God, is responsible for divine actions. Some courts quickly shut this down. They say you can sue a church. A church is a legal entity. It has property, it has people, it can be held responsible for its own actions. But you cannot use the church as a stand-in for God. The legal system separates the institution from the deity it worships. There are also cases where people sue themselves or their parents for being born, and they might try to involve God in that. These cases are usually about existential angst, or a challenge to the idea of existence itself. Again, courts dismiss these. They say you cannot sue for being born. It's not a legally recognizable harm, and you cannot bring God into it, because God is not a party the court can recognize. These types of cases highlight the often strange and deeply personal reasons people come to court. They might not be looking for legal success. They might be using the court as a forum for their personal issues. A common theme in these attempted lawsuits is the phrase act of God. This phrase is often used in contracts, especially insurance policies. It refers to natural events like floods, earthquakes, or severe storms. These are events that humans cannot prevent or control. If your house is damaged by an act of God, your insurance might cover it, or it might specifically exclude it, depending on your policy. But crucially, act of God, in a legal sense, does not mean God literally caused the event. It's a legal term of art. It simply means a natural force. It's a way for lawyers and insurance companies to talk about unpreventable disasters. It doesn't mean you can then turn around and sue God for the damage. The courts are very clear on this. The phrase is a descriptor, not an attribution of legal liability. The fate of all these cases is the same. Dismissal. The courts use consistent reasoning. They will say there is no standing. This means the person suing doesn't have a legal right to bring the case. Their harm isn't one the law can address against this particular defendant. Or they will say there's no subject matter jurisdiction. This means the court doesn't have the authority to hear a case of this type. Suing a divine entity is not a type of case recognized by the courts. And, of course, there's the issue of serving process. How do you notify God? The legal system requires all parties to a suit to be properly informed. This ensures fairness. If God cannot be notified, the suit cannot proceed. These cases, while often seen as quirks, serve a purpose in showing the limits of the legal system. They show that while courts are open to many kinds of disputes, they are not open to all of them. They are not places for philosophical debates or theological arguments. They are places for applying human laws to human problems. And when a case goes beyond those boundaries, the courts must draw a line. They do so by sticking to their fundamental rules about who can sue, who can be sued, and what kinds of issues they can actually resolve. So, while the idea of suing God might pop up from time to time, the legal reality is always the same. It's not going to happen. The U.S. legal system is a powerful thing. It can make big decisions. It can shape lives. But it has very strict rules about what it can and cannot do. When someone tries to sue God, these rules become very clear. They show us the boundaries of human law, and they explain why such lawsuits are impossible. It all comes down to basic legal definitions and principles. First, let's talk about legal personhood. In law, a person is an entity that has rights and responsibilities. This doesn't just mean a human being. A corporation is also a legal person. It can sue, it can be sued, it can own property. It can enter contracts. It exists in the eyes of the law. But God, in any religious sense, is not a legal person. God doesn't have a social security number. God doesn't have a business address. God doesn't file taxes. The law just doesn't recognize a deity as an entity it can deal with directly. If you can't define the defendant as a legal person, the lawsuit can't even start. It's like trying to sue the concept of gravity or luck. These things exist, but they are not legal entities. Then there's standing. To sue someone, you must have standing. This means you must show that you have suffered a direct harm. And this harm must be caused by the defendant. It has to be a harm the law can fix. If your neighbor crashes their car into your fence, you have standing to sue them. They caused a direct harm to your property. But if a hurricane destroys your house, can you say God directly caused that harm in a legal sense? It's tough. The law expects a clear chain of cause and effect. It expects a concrete, measurable injury. And it expects the defendant to be a party capable of causing that injury in a legally culpable way. Natural disasters are often called acts of God in insurance, but this is just a way to say no human is responsible. It does not assign blame to a divine entity that can then be sued. The issue of jurisdiction is also key. A court must have jurisdiction over the defendant. This means the court has the authority to make decisions about that defendant. Usually, this means the defendant lives in the area the court serves, or they do business there, or the events that led to the lawsuit happened there. How can a court claim jurisdiction over God? If God is everywhere, does that mean every court has jurisdiction or no court? The legal system relies on clear geographical and procedural boundaries. A court in Nebraska can't usually make rulings about someone living in France, for instance, unless there's a very specific connection. There's simply no legal basis for a court to claim power over a divine being. Service of process is another huge hurdle. When you sue someone, you have to formally notify them. This is called serving the papers. It ensures the defendant knows about the lawsuit. It gives them a chance to respond. This is a fundamental part of due process. It ensures fairness. How do you serve God? Do you leave the papers at a church? Send them to the sky? Chambers tried to argue that God's omnipresence meant God was already served. But courts don't accept this. They need a verifiable method of notification, a tangible address. A person to accept the papers. Without proper service, the case cannot move forward. It's a procedural requirement that can't be bypassed with theological arguments. And then what about a remedy? If a court finds in favor of the plaintiff, it issues a remedy. This could be money. It could be an order to stop doing something, an injunction. Or an order to do something specific. What kind of remedy could a court order God to provide? Could it order God to stop floods? Or to prevent future earthquakes? And how would such an order be enforced? The legal system needs practical, enforceable outcomes. It can't issue orders that are impossible to carry out, or orders that cross into theological or scientific domains it has no authority over. These legal principles are not minor details. They are the foundations of the U.S. justice system. They ensure that lawsuits are real, tangible disputes between recognizable parties. They make sure the system deals with problems it is actually equipped to solve. The law is based on observable facts. It's based on human actions. It's based on rules created by people. It cannot, by its very nature, legislate or adjudicate the actions of a divine entity. So, when a judge dismisses a lawsuit against God, it's not because they don't believe in God, or because they are being disrespectful. It's because they are upholding the basic tenets of the law. They are saying this system is designed for a specific purpose, and this purpose does not include resolving disputes with the divine. The limits are clear, the definitions are firm, and because of this, the idea of a successful lawsuit against God in a U.S. court remains squarely in the realm of fiction. It's a good story, but it's not how the law works. The story of a man suing God just won't go away. It sticks with people. Even though it's not really possible in a U.S. court, the idea has a powerful draw. Why is that? What does it say about us that this kind of story has such staying power? One big reason is that it taps into a very human feeling powerlessness. Bad things happen to good people. Natural disasters strike. Illnesses take loved ones. Sometimes there's no one to blame. No human agent caused the harm. But we are wired to look for answers. We want to find a cause. We want to find accountability. When there's no earthly target, the mind often turns to higher powers. If God is all-powerful, then surely God is responsible, right? This line of thinking, even if not strictly logical in a legal sense, is very human. It's a way of grappling with immense pain and suffering. Another part of the appeal is the idea of ultimate justice. Our legal system tries to provide justice. It tries to right wrongs, but it's imperfect. It sometimes fails. There are always cases where people feel the system didn't deliver true justice. So, the thought of taking a case to the highest possible authority, even a divine one, is compelling. It's a fantasy of holding the universe itself accountable. It's a longing for a perfect system where every wrong is made right and every injustice is corrected. The story also plays on our sense of drama and the underdog. Imagine a single person standing up against the creator of the universe. It's a compelling narrative. It's the ultimate David and Goliath story. It appeals to our desire to see the little guy challenge the big, overwhelming force. Even if the big force is a theological concept rather than a physical entity. This symbolic act of defiance, even if legally doomed, carries a lot of emotional weight. It's about asserting human will against what feels like arbitrary fate. And then there's the element of challenging authority. Senator Chambers used his lawsuit to challenge legal authority. He pushed against the way the courts handle religious issues. For others, it might be a way to challenge religious authority itself, or to question deep-seated beliefs. It uses the serious, formal structure of the court to ask very informal, often irreverent questions. It forces a confrontation between faith and facts, between the sacred and the secular. What these attempts ultimately show is the hard boundary between the legal world and the spiritual or philosophical world. The law deals with what can be proven, what can be observed, what can be enforced among people. It's a practical system for earthly problems. Religion, faith, and philosophy deal with questions of meaning, purpose, and ultimate causes. They are not bound by the same rules of evidence or jurisdiction. The two systems serve different functions, and they operate on different planes. A court cannot tell you what the meaning of life is, and it cannot compel a deity to appear. So, no, a U.S. court has never seriously entertained a lawsuit against God as a defendant. It hasn't happened because it cannot happen. The fundamental rules of our legal system prevent it. There's no legal person to sue, there's no way to serve them, there's no jurisdiction. And there's no practical remedy a court could order. These are not minor technicalities. They are the bedrock principles that keep the legal system working. They ensure that it remains a tool for resolving human disputes, not divine ones. But the story lives on. It's a testament to the human spirit's desire for justice, for answers, and for accountability, even in the face of the unanswerable. It reminds us that people will use whatever means they have, even unusual ones, to voice their pain and confusion. It's a rich piece of legal folklore, and it serves as a powerful reminder of both the strengths and the inherent limits of the legal system we've built. It's a system designed for people, by people, and about people, and in that context, God remains beyond its reach.